The San Jose Sharks landed the biggest fish in the 2024 NHL Draft, but they also made several other big moves, and the Buffalo Sabres and Calgary Flames had some interesting picks as well. And we're all set for the start of free agency later today. We're going to handle that and a lot more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Sharks, JD Young. And JD, what a great weekend for the San Jose Sharks. And it all starts with the first overall pick in the NHL Draft. I mean, how do you feel about the addition, and how soon do you expect Macklin Celebrini to be in the NHL?
As a Sharks fan, this is why you lost all those games, right? Was to put yourself in a position to draft Macklin Celebrini, who's been compared to Sidney Crosby, Jonathan Toews, like some of the greatest players, in the last kind of generation of NHL superstars. And it feels great, Gil. It's just a great knowing that the Sharks they've been doing a great job of adding pieces. You look at William Macklin, who had a really positive first year. They get Will Smith last year. You have prospects like Quentin Musty, Kasper Holton. But Celebrini is like that cornerstone franchise piece where it's almost like a tipping point where, okay, we've gotten Celebrini. We have like the guy that we can kind of build around here and kind of go from here. And now it's how do you build around Celebrini? And the Sharks have a lot of huge pieces. And I would be shocked if Celebrini is not. Celebrini's gonna be in the NHL next year. It's going to happen. The Sharks have done that the big process now is how do you put him in the best position by, kind of surrounding him with talent. But Celebrini is just too good to go back in the NCAA. He would go back, probably win another Hobie Baker Award, but very much big fish in a small pond, and he needs to be playing NHL games as he can kind of continue his development and progression. But for Sharks fans, though, I know Bedard is seen as more of a generational prospect, but with Celebrini, you're getting a more well-rounded player who can play a full 200-foot game. He's good in his defensive zone. And the great thing about Celebrini is whatever you need him to do, the kid's going to do it. Like if you need him to be a good, play well in the defensive zone, he can do that. If you need him to be a passer and you surround him with scoring wingers, if you need him to be the main scoring threat, he can do that. You need him to transport the puck. Whatever you need to do, Celebrini is just like, cool, I can do that. So, great. And the kid just wants to work. He actually cut his trip short in Vegas so he could go home, go to the Bay Area and get a skating on Sunday to get ready for development camp. Like this kid, he's going to change the Sharks franchise here.
Now, you were at the draft and you got to interview him as part of a scrum. What impressed you most about him?
For a kid who just turned 18 like 2 weeks ago, super polished, which you would expect, right? His dad working for the Golden State Warriors. He's been hanging around professional athletes his entire life. Draymond Green, Steph Curry, these guys have been in his life, and he's been around professional athletes, and he's known that like this is kind of everything's leading up to this moment. But super polished kid. He has future captain material written all over him. I would be willing to bet dollars to donuts that he will wear the C for the Sharks at some point. It's going to be just a matter of when, not if, for him. But yeah, just super polished, super, just kind of knows what was expected of him and kind of knows that what the weight of expectations are for him and is willing to kind of do whatever it takes to fulfill those expectations. So this kid is great support system around him with his family and his friends. Definitely the weight of an entire franchise on him, but he seems like he's ready to take on the challenge.
Now, that was not the only pick the Sharks had in the first round, and they made some very good choices in the second and later rounds as well. Talk to me a little bit about the other quote-unquote picks that the Sharks made over the weekend.
So, yeah, the Sharks, before the draft, they moved up from 14, which they got from the Penguins as part of the Erik Karlsson deal, up to 11. They swapped in with the Buffalo Sabres, where they were able to get Sam Dickinson. I asked Mike Grier if he was surprised to see Dickinson there, and he said, yeah, a little bit. Dickinson is a 6'3" left-handed shot playing for the London Knights in the OHL, but smooth skater, well-rounded, very physical, kind of whatever you need him to do. Needs to work on his consistency a little bit. I think there's a little bit more of his offensive game that can grow, especially on London, London is just a good team every year. But for the Sharks, who I didn't expect them. I know the Sharks, again, didn't expect Dickinson to be there. You basically got your 1C and your first pair of defensemen in one draft, so it feels like a really nice win there. Sharks added some other guys like Igor Chernovsky, who was projected to be a first-round pick, but fell to the beginning of the second round. Kind of big Russian power forward guy who can kind of do a little bit of everything. Production wasn't there in the KHL, but he kind of showed a lot just the way he was playing, especially in bottom 6 minutes. Can play a physical game, can play kind of a more finesse game, is really able to kind of change his game to the surroundings, and took some swings on defensemen, especially in the later rounds, who I think were going to really kind of help fill out the prospect core or prospect pipeline. Mike Grier loves them big boys, 6'3", 6'4" type of guys who play physical. They got some stuff that they need to work on, but Grier, I think, came away. You have to give Mike Grier an A+ after the weekend he had. And again, when you get Macklin Celebrini, but the other moves he made and the pieces he added, it feels like the Sharks are real. You could argue the Sharks have the best, if not one of the best prospect pools in the entire NHL right now.
Now, free agency starts Monday at noon Eastern time. The Sharks need to get to the floor of the salary cap still. So what do you expect from San Jose once free agency gets underway?
So I think Grier is going to continue to be smart, right? He's come out and said that they don't expect any massive long-term commitments, right? Because when you do draft your Celebrinis and your Will Smiths and your Eklunds, you have to pay them at some point, and he's working in that window right now to try to add pieces that will help these guys kind of accelerate their development, but then come off the books and you have to start kind of paying them. So he said he's looking for the kind of 1 to 4 year window on contracts, but he did mention scoring is something that Sharks really do need. They've added some kind of bottom 6 guys in with the Barclay Goodrow, trading for Ty Dellandrea, getting Carl Grundstrom from the LA Kings, but they need some more just scoring and some more top 6 pieces to play with Macklin Celebrini and to play with Will Smith and to play with Eklund. So I expect him to be pretty aggressive there. So maybe it's a shorter term, but higher AAV type of contract that the Sharks, with their flexibility right now, can offer. And I wouldn't be surprised if they look to add another puck-moving defenseman on the right side. They just got Jake Wallman in a kind of a coup from the Red Wings, getting Jake Wallman and a second-round pick just to take him off their books. But I would expect them to look to add another puck-moving right-handed shot defenseman to kind of help Wallman out here and just give themselves a little bit more flexibility on the blue line.
Describe the difference to me right now in the mood surrounding this franchise today versus a week ago.
I mean, Sharks fans are the Sharks fans are just so excited right now. You keep the future's teal. That's been kind of the Sharks motto here. And I think too, just even at the draft, right, having Joe Thornton, who the best player in Sharks history, having just basically handing the franchise off to Macklin Celebrini, and we as Sharks fans, we know it's still going to be a long process, right? We know this thing isn't going to turn around tomorrow, but this team is coming, and if Will Smith turns out to be anywhere half as good as we expect him to be, Eklund continues his progression, Dickinson is as good as we think he's going to be, and Macklin Celebrini is the guy. this team is going to be a massive threat in the West and here in a few years. And, we've done the hard part, and now it's, can you build around these guys? But yeah, the Sharks fans are just in Vegas. I saw so many Sharks jerseys, even, at the draft. Anytime Celebrini was even mentioned or like shown on the screen, Sharks fans were just going crazy. Yes, the franchise, it's been a long 5 years since their last playoff run, and it feels like we can start to see when the tank is going to be full and exciting again here soon. So,
all right. Well, JD, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Of course, you can find the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch on YouTube as well. You can follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. You can follow me on Twitter at MyFryhole.
All right, JD, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, buddy.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Check out the odds on your favorite baseball team. Maybe take a look at some football futures, or use your knowledge of hockey to find some great bets on FanDuel. Head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. It is great to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Sabres, Joe DiBiasi. And Joe, were you surprised at all by the trade that the Sabres made to move back a few spots in the draft, and then with the selection of Konsta Helenius?
I would definitely say I was surprised at the timing. Little weird that you get a trade like that the day before the draft, a draft pick trade where you're moving down 3 spots. Value-wise, I have no surprise that they would have said yes to it. You move down from pick 11 to pick 14, you pick up a second-round pick in exchange. That kind of seems like a no-brainer, unless you have someone that you are so obsessed with. But again, my thought would have been, how do you know the day before what the board is going to look like there? The Sharks had some idea of what it was going to look like. They had the gumption to do that one day before Mike Greer, the Sharks GM, doing it. So, yeah, surprised by the timing. If it had happened during the draft, I would have said no. Because, again, otherwise I thought the trade made sense from a value perspective, not from a need perspective. They have the strongest prospect pool, or, at least one of the strongest prospect pools. They're never ranked below the bottom or the top 3 on that front. So they didn't need another pick, but for 3 spots, you take it.
What does Helenius add to the prospect pool of the Buffalo Sabres?
I like him a lot for what he will fill in. They've got a lot of skill. They've got a lot of speed, not a lot of size. And not that Helenius checks all the opposite boxes there. He really does help, though. He will fill a center role. Let's say everything goes well and all of these guys hit, and they won't all, but you hope maybe 70% of them do if you're really good at it. And if that happens, you've got guys like Matt Savoy, small, speed, skilled center that also plays the wing. Yuri Kulik, who's got an awesome shot and is a hard-working two-way guy, but the sniper part of his game on the power play is so valuable. You've got a Zach Benson right now who's already made the NHL. The playmaking is on display there. You've got all of this skill, top 6 type of forwards littered through the prospect pool. They didn't really have a guy like this. They didn't have hey, this guy is going to eventually be Sam Bennett is a comparison that I've seen for him, where he's very hard to play against. He's going to be in your face during and after the whistle. He is going to put the puck in the back of the net for you. He does have skill. At the same time, though, the two-way game, his defensive acumen, his responsibilities in his own end, there is so much there. He was doing that. I think it's really what allowed him to have the role he did in the Finnish Elite League, or the Liga they call it now, where he's playing in a men's league and he's playing kind of a defensive role for his team. I think the maturity that says about him is super impressive, which is why I think you're hearing more and more of this guy might be NHL ready quicker than you think. Kevin Adams said the same thing, their GM who picked him. Like, this guy is not going to take long. And I think his two-way game, the maturity as a player really speaks to that. The other thing I would throw in about him very quickly is while I think a lot of the scouts and even the way he's been talked about by those that have really watched him think, okay, the real value here is the all-around game, the defensive role, the physicality, even though he's not huge. But the numbers guys, the stat people that kind of track like what you do in the leagues before you get to the NHL, look at what he did, 36 points in 51 games in a men's league at 18 years old, 17 years old too, and think guys that do that have number one line ability offensively. So there is a group, and it's mostly the numbers guys that think even his offensive game has a really high ceiling.
Were you pleased with the way they used the extra second-round pick that they acquired and with the picks they made on day 2 of the draft? So
that's where I have a little bit of a question about what Adams did on, let's say, day 2 of draft day. He didn't trade the pick outright that he got for that trade. He got pick number 42 from the Sharks, and he did end up using that pick literally on a big defenseman. Adam Kleber filled another need in their prospect pool. They have so many left shot guys, no right shot guys to speak of whatsoever. He's big too. They have a skilled blue line in the NHL now and in the prospect pipeline, but they don't have a lot of size. So they had a 6'5" right shot defenseman who's big and physical, exactly what you would have thought. But what maybe allowed them to pick him and then also make a trade was having that extra pick. But what did they spend that extra second-round pick on that they had? Beck Melenstein. Okay, 4th liner from the Capitals. Before even telling you anything about the player, usually doesn't sound good to a fan base when, hey guys, we traded a second-round pick for an NHL player. Oh, cool. Let's look at what he is. 26 years old. He's played 105 games in the NHL, and he scored 6 goals last year. Like, what? I'm not saying second-round picks are gold, but didn't Andrew Mangiapane get traded the other day for a second-round pick? You know, you get middle 6 players that get traded for second-round picks all the time. And we got a 4th liner who has, before last year, wasn't even a regular NHL player. That was strange to me. I get what they're going for. They don't, same with the NHL club. I just talked about this with their other guys. They don't have a lot of tough to play against, size, physicality. This dude hits. It's a weird number. You won't hear it much in the analytics world, but hits per 60 minutes right at the top of the league. So this dude's going to throw his weight around. He's a great shot blocker. He's a great penalty killer. So he definitely fills a spot. It's just, it feels like the type of player that usually gets traded for a 5th-round pick, not a 2nd-round pick.
Yeah, that does sound like a little bit of a reach, but it also sounds like it fills a need as well. What do you expect the Sabres to do when free agency starts noon on Monday?
It's a really good question. I mean, it could be anywhere from I think there's really two outcomes that I'm bracing for, and I feel like Sabre fans are mentally bracing for, which is anywhere from total inaction, and that might be based more this year than ever, though, on their inability to attract good players. I really wonder, it's hard to know because not all this gets reported on. They wanted to make a trade this draft. They talked about it openly. Kevin Adams did, about wanting to trade pick number 11, at the time they had 11, for a proven, established veteran player. All the insiders, Friedman, LeBron, all of them are out there the weeks leading up to the draft saying that, oh, they want a top 6 forward. They want a top 6 forward. They want a 3rd-line center. Like, they want these 2 things really badly this offseason. And then the draft comes and goes, no deal. Now, I know there weren't a lot of trades at all. Were there any trades in the 1st round? Maybe not for a player, right? There were some trade
not
ups.
for a player.
Yeah, there were trade ups, but they're not for a player. So I get that, but there is this worry right now, I think, here that, one, does the GM have the ability to make a trade like that? Because you could say all you want. You could show up to the car dealership and say, I want this SUV, but, I'm only willing to pay $12,000. Well, okay, they cost $30,000. So I guess you're not getting one. Like, there's a little bit of a worry that this GM just isn't willing to pay the price of what things cost to help your team improve. there's, especially when you have the best prospect pool, or one of them in the league, there's also a grave concern right now that this, I think, is real. I just wonder how often it gets in the way, that players don't want to play for the Sabres. We know of multiple trades that they've made in the last 12 to 18 months that were agreed upon, and then the players said no. Even players that aren't stars. A year and a half ago, they traded for Matt Murray, and then Matt Murray told them, no, I don't want to go there. At this trade deadline, I don't know who the exact player was, but there was a report, and actually Adams even kind of spoke to it, that they had a deal agreed upon for a 27-year-old defenseman, and then the player didn't want to come here. I get it, right? If you don't have a connection to Buffalo, if you don't know someone that plays on the team, or if you're not from here, like Alex Tuck, what's your sales pitch? I got a 13-year playoff drought. A lot of these players in the league now are 24, 25. They probably don't even remember the Sabres in the playoffs, let alone them being even like really good, like going deep for runs. So the reputation of the club is so far down. I just don't know what their ability is to get players to waive their no trade clause. I assume sitting here right now that every player in the league that has a no trade clause, which I looked this up this week, is 22% of the league. Wow. And that 22% is the better 22% of the league. I have to assume that 21% has the Sabres on their no trade clause, that there's very few that don't. So I got a GM that I don't know how he's able to make trades. I've got a league that I'm not assuming wants to come here. So that's the trade element. Now I wonder if they're going to go spend like crazy in free agency, overpay for guys to make up for it. And that could get you in trouble. So they could do nothing because they've done a lot of inaction the last couple of years, or I'm mentally bracing for they're going to go give out a really bad contract, even if it's for a good player, where NHL Twitter is going to go, oh, what did the Sabres just give him?
We shall see. I know you'll have it covered every step of the way. Joe, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find the podcast and where they can find you on social media?
Definitely. So Locked On Sabres, wherever you're listening to podcasts, YouTube as well. You got me on Twitter at Sneaky Joe Sports. You can follow me there. And we also have our Locked On Sabres text line, which for the diehard Sabre fans and casual too, if you want to get the scoop, join subtext.com/Locked On Sabres. We're always texting throughout the day, free agency day especially.
All right, Joe, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Gil.
It is great to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Flames, Jess Belmosto. And Jess, your team was very busy over the weekend at the NHL Draft. 2 picks in the first round, multiple picks in a few other rounds. How do you feel overall about this weekend?
I think that this is a whole new era for the Flames. I mean, last season, Craig Conroy came in and had previous messes to clean up. And this year, at the draft, he kind of hit it out of the park. I think that rather than sticking with, oh, this guy's big, he actually went for need rather than just like attributes. And it's nice to kind of see them actually nail not just 1 or 2 draft picks, but basically everyone.
Which pick impressed you the most? Which are you most happy with?
I really like Zyne Perekh and Andrew Basha. I think that grabbing a defenseman was incredibly important, especially someone as highly touted as Perekh. So like good stuff there. He has room to grow and just really need to replenish the cabinet there through the pipeline on the blue line. And then Basha's a Calgary kid, so you don't have to worry about him wanting to be closer to home, which is really great here for the Flames. But it just overall, I'm really happy with all the talent and the ceilings of these kids.
So what does this draft say about the direction of this team going forward?
It's looking more like a rebuild rather than a retool. I think that they tried to get away with using retooling to kind of keep fans involved and not scare them off with that big scary word. But then you trade off Jacob Markstrom and you got to start looking at things a little bit differently. And I certainly did not expect the reception to be as positive as it is. I think the Flames fans are ready for good hockey again, and like sustainably long good hockey.
You mentioned the departure of Jacob Markstrom. Talk to me about the goaltending situation as it stands now, and what do you think the Flames will do between now and the start of training camp?
So Dan Vladar actually had season-ending surgery in March. So Dustin Wolf was able to finish the season up with the NHL. And last update we got a few weeks ago, he seems to be on track to start the season. And obviously this is a big deal because with that vacancy, Dustin Wolf finally gets a true consistent shot at the NHL. And that's what fans have been clamoring for the last 2 years or so. So it's nice to be at that point. Conroy said that he does expect to bring in a third goaltender. And I mean, that would make a lot of sense. Neither Vladar or Wolf have more like the workload experience of a starter. And it's funny because last year they were very against carrying 3 goaltenders, but now they're welcoming the idea.
And you think they'll keep all 3 at the NHL level to start the season, or will one of them start in the A?
Part of me thinks that they might start Vladar on a conditioning stint down there. But I mean, at the same time, they could throw Wolf back down there to get his momentum going and get him comfortable. It's really a toss-up. I guess it'll depend on where Vladar is in terms of his rehab and his off-season training.
So free agency gets underway Monday at noon Eastern time. How do you expect the Flames to approach free agency, and what are they looking for, if anything?
Yeah, so I think the Flames, like, they definitely have some spots that they could fill internally or go the free agent route. I think obviously with losing Mangiapane, you have to find another winger. And while they do have that within the organization, I wouldn't be opposed to them going out and grabbing someone like Jake DeBrusk. I think that his time in Boston has come to an end, and it's an Alberta boy from Edmonton, obviously. But I think, it just makes sense to me. But Craig Conroy also made it clear that they're not doing long-term deals. 4 years basically sounds like the cutoff. They're not interested in 5 to 7 year deals. And they're willing to take on bad contracts, which that's how you know you're in a rebuild. You're willing to like help a team out, maybe launder some money legally, of course. But I think that there's supposedly a reunion happening in the works potentially. So we'll have to wait and see who that is.
Okay, what is the rumor? Who is the rumored returnee?
We're hearing Mark Giordano. He still thinks he has another year or 2 left in the tank. I mean, former Flames captain. I wouldn't hate that at all. I think that obviously the Flames, they need people on the blue line. It's kind of a disaster. So that would be a good addition. I've heard rumors of maybe Sean Monahan and TJ Brody, but I really don't think it's going to be TJ Brody.
And as far as the Flames are concerned, how much cap space are they working with right now?
Just around $29 million. So Craig Conroy has a lot of money to play with, and that's kind of scary. But based on how he went about trading those pending UFAs, how he's handled trading Markstrom and Mangiapane and nailing the draft, I think myself and other Flames fans have more confidence in how he proceeds and how he approaches really this whole project.
And is it possible, considering that there's a 4-year contract limit, that a trade would be a more likely option than free agency for some of these players?
I definitely think so. I don't necessarily think they're just putting all their eggs in the free agency basket. And at the end of the season, Craig Conroy kind of made it clear that, like, hey, we used to be able to get guys to come here in free agency. We're going to have to go about it a different way now. And that's good because clearly the past wasn't working to the extent that we'd all like to see. So it's nice to see a philosophical change and actually have actions behind those words.
All right. Well, Jess, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yes, so you can find Locked On Flames wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube, just search Locked On Flames, and you can follow me on X, Twitter, whatever you're calling it, just at Jess Belmosto.
All right, Jess, I know you'll cover the Flames every step of the way this offseason. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Gil.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. That's going to do it for us today. I want to thank my guests, J.D. Young of Locked On Sharks, Joe DiBiasi of Locked On Sabres, and Jess Belmosto of Locked On Flames for joining me today. I am Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of Locked On NHL, and I also co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Don't forget, everydayers, we are here Monday through Friday bringing you the biggest stories from around the NHL. And with free agency getting underway today, there are sure to be lots of big stories this week. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.